What did we learn during our study of Luke? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we conclude our study of the book of Luke on walking through the Bible. We have now come to the 127th and final episode in our study of Luke. If you have missed any episodes or would like to rewatch this series, you can find all of them at www.eastendchurch.org by searching under the media pull-down menu for the WTTB English podcast link. So having now completed our verse-by-verse study of Luke, it is a good time to reflect upon what we have learned. If you recall back to our first lesson in the series, you'll remember that this book is written to a Greek man named Theophilus, making Luke a letter much like the epistles later on in the New Testament, and thus different than the other Gospels whose original audience is much larger. Luke is a physician, but he is also an historian, or at least acquainted with the field, and so he presents us an orderly account of Jesus' life. That doesn't mean that Matthew's and Mark's Gospels were disorderly. It simply means that Luke's Gospel is more chronological. In fact, because of this phrase, Luke's Gospel is used by many as a way to harmonize common events that the other Gospels speak of into their proper order. Matthew's Gospel begins with the birth of Jesus. Mark's Gospel begins with the start of Jesus' ministry, while Luke's Gospel begins with the forerunner of Jesus, John the Baptist. It was important to show that the Messiah had a forerunner, for such was prophesied in the Old Testament. So instead of starting with the angel appearing to Mary, we start with the angel appearing to Zacharias in the temple, telling him that he and his wife would bear a son and call his name John. It would be this John who would make straight the paths of the Lord. 6 months after that, the angel would appear to Mary, a virgin in Nazareth, and announce that she too would have a son named Jesus, who would be called the Son of the Most High and be given the throne of King David. Now, after reading through Luke, we know that this kingdom is a spiritual kingdom, not a physical one, a point that the Jews and many people who call themselves Christians fail to understand. From there, Luke gives us an account of Jesus' birth. Luke mentions of the rulers that were in power at the time, which allows us to place Jesus' birth in history and explain why Mary and Joseph were in Bethlehem, where the Messiah was prophesied to be born, and not Nazareth, where they lived. The reason was a census called by Caesar Augustus that forced people to go to the city of their family. Since Joseph and Mary were of the tribe of Judah and the house of David, they went to Bethlehem. It was there that Jesus was born and seen by the shepherds, who praised God for what they had seen. From there, Luke does something that neither Matthew, Mark, or John does. Gives us a short glimpse of Jesus' life growing up. Jesus' family was in Jerusalem for Passover when Jesus was 12 years old, and following the feast, went home unknowingly without Jesus with them. When Joseph and Mary found Jesus, behold, he was in the temple, questioning the lawyers about the law and what they taught, and showing himself to have quite the knowledge of the law, far beyond what a normal 12-year-old would have. This, of course, is because Jesus is God, the one who gave the law, though the lawyers didn't know that. That's all we get about the childhood of Jesus, as Luke skips forward after that 18 more years to the point where Jesus begins his ministry at about age 30. Jesus' ministry, of course, begins with his baptism following Jesus' temptations of the devil. Throughout the rest of the book, we have the familiar refrain of Jesus calling his apostles, Jesus teaching and performing miracles, as well as telling many parables, though the stories themselves have plenty of unique material to Luke alone. For instance, Luke quickly skims through much of Jesus' Galilean ministry that Matthew covers. Thus, the stories of the calming of the storm, the casting out of the many demons from the man in the land of the Gadarenes, and the feeding of the 5,000 occur relatively early in Luke's account. Instead, Luke focuses heavily on Jesus' Perean ministry, which begins at the end of chapter 9. In the chronology of events, this is about 6 months before his crucifixion. It is during this part of Jesus' ministry that we find Jesus actually dining with the Pharisees, healing a crippled woman on the Sabbath, warning against Herod, and telling many parables, all exclusive to the book of Luke. In fact, of all the Gospels, Luke gives us the most parables, 16 of which are only found in Luke, and 17 of which are told during Jesus' Perean ministry. The only parables that Luke tells us that are common to Matthew or Mark is the parable of the sower, and the parable of the vineyard. Following Jesus' Perean ministry, Jesus travels to Jerusalem, where he spends a week preaching and teaching, after which he is crucified. As far as the crucifixion story is concerned, we do get some new details. First, we didn't know that Jesus was also tried before Herod before being condemned by Pontius Pilate. We didn't know that Jesus asked the Father to forgive his murderers because they didn't know what they were doing. And we didn't know that one of the thieves being crucified alongside Jesus actually repented, had his sins forgiven, and was saved before Jesus, and he died. Those are all amazing details that help us fill out the picture of what happened when Jesus died. Luke's gospel, like Matthew's and Mark's does, ends with the resurrection. Luke focuses on Jesus' appearance to two men on the road to Emmaus, followed by Jesus' teachings of his disciples during the 40 days between Jesus' resurrection and his ascension into heaven. All of this will segue nicely into the beginning of Acts, which is Luke's second letter to Theophilus, which will focus on the beginning and history of the early church. Before completing our review, we would be remiss if we didn't quickly remind ourselves of some of the themes of this book. Recall again that Luke is writing to a Greek, a Gentile, which clarifies why Luke has to explain many customs of the Jews, such as why Zacharias was in the temple in chapter 1, why Jesus was presented in the temple in chapter 2, why Jesus' family was in Jerusalem for Passover in chapter 2, and why Jesus was teaching in the synagogues on the Sabbath in chapter 4. A Jewish audience wouldn't have needed those explanations. Luke also focuses on Jesus being the Savior of the whole world. This is seen in Simeon's proclamation about Jesus in Luke 2:32, and the fact that Jesus' lineage is traced all the way back to Adam, not just to Abraham. Gentiles needed to know that Jesus was their Savior too, and not just a Savior of the Jews. With that, then, we conclude our study of the book of Luke. The Lord willing, in the next episode, we will be returning to the Old Testament and begin our study of the book of Numbers with an introduction to that book. We hope you'll join us for that discussion as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.